Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases recorded in history. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested to know in which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. The Arkansas Ozarks of 1875 were a land of rugged beauty and unforgiving isolation, where prosperity was as elusive as the mountain lion, and greed often turned a man's heart darker than any mine shaft. It was in these unforgiving hills, nestled within the remote, heavily forested confines of Madison County, that the tragic tale of Elijah Thorne unfolded. Elijah, a solitary and hardened prospector in his late 40s, was renowned for his uncanny ability to uncover veins of ore where others saw only barren rock. His life had been a ceaseless chase for that elusive mother lode, that one strike that would bring him wealth and respect, lifting him from the endless cycle of poverty that had defined his family for generations. One sweltering summer, after months of futile digging and dwindling supplies, Elijah ventured into a secluded, almost forgotten canyon, rumored to be cursed by old indigenous legends that spoke of the whispering rock and a light that draws men's souls. What he discovered there, within the dark, glistening maw of an ancient cave, was not gold, but something far more potent, far more insidious and utterly beyond human understanding, an enormous vein of black, crystalline obsidian that pulsed with a faint internal light, seemingly absorbing sound and warping sanity. This wasn't merely a mineral, it was a hungry, resonant presence, and Elijah Thorne, captivated by its sinister beauty and the whispers it slowly planted in his mind, began a descent into obsession, greed, and ultimately a madness that would claim his very soul and those foolish enough to seek his ill-gotten treasures. The cave held a treasure beyond measure, but it demanded an unforeseen price, a debt that would soon be collected in blood. Elijah Thorne had come to the Ozarks years ago, drawn by the same speculative fervor that gripped many after the war. He was a man of few words, his face perpetually grim from the sun and toil, his eyes sharp from years of solitary observation. Unlike other prospectors, he wasn't interested in rumors of silver or lead. He felt the earth, listened to its subtle groans, seeking a different kind of prize. His closest companion was his old mule, Bess, and a battered prospecting pickaxe. Life was a relentless cycle of digging, blasting, and meager finds, punctuated by weeks spent in the nearest supply town, Kingston, trading for beans, flour, and gunpowder. He owed no man a living, and none owed him, a fact he took bitter pride in. But as the summer of 1875 scorched the already parched hills, his luck seemed to run dry. His boots were wearing thin, and his flour sack was almost empty. Desperation gnawed at him, pushing him deeper into the unexplored canyons. It was then that he remembered the old Cherokee tales of Serpent Gorge, a place of strange geological formations and a darkness that absorbed light, a darkness the tribe avoided. The geological map of the area, crudely drawn and largely based on trapper accounts, marked Serpent Gorge with an ambiguous, unexplored, unstable notation. For Elijah, this was an invitation. Entering Serpent Gorge felt like stepping into another world. The dense foliage, even in summer, blocked most sunlight, plunging the canyon floor into perpetual twilight. The air grew strangely still, silent. No birdsong, no rustle of leaves, no chirping insects, just an unsettling quiet. Deeper still, where the canyon narrowed into a twisting chasm, Elijah discovered the cave. Its mouth, partially hidden by cascades of thick moss, seemed to breathe a colder, heavier air. Inside, his lantern cast flickering shadows that seemed to bend and stretch, distorting his perception. And then he saw it, a vein of obsidian unlike any he had ever witnessed. Not dull and brittle, but enormous crystalline formations of jet-black rock that absorbed his lantern light, only to shimmer with an internal violet glow. The deeper he went, the larger and more vibrant the crystals became, thrumming with an almost inaudible hum, a sound that bypassed his ears and resonated directly in his skull. His journal entries from that period reveal his initial wonder and then the gradual onset of a disturbing shift. Discovered the Obsidian Heart. It glows. It hums, not cold, but receptive. No mere stone. This is pure potential. And then, days later, an ominous line. The whispers begin. It tells me secrets of the earth, riches beyond imagining. Just listen, the obsidian wasn't just beautiful. It was active. Elijah soon discovered that touching the larger crystal formations produced a jolt of almost electrical energy that filled his mind with vibrant, albeit fleeting, images, maps of undiscovered ore veins, flashes of hidden knowledge about the mountain's depths. But these visions came at a price. The longer he stayed in the cave, the more the silence of Serpent Gorge seeped into his being, dulling his sense of urgency, replacing his apprehension with an intense, singular focus on the obsidian. Food became an afterthought, sleep a distraction. He worked tirelessly, driven by the ceaseless, insistent whispers that promised more, always more. The crystals seemed to radiate an effect that intensified a peculiar greed, turning it into a feverish hunger that warped his moral compass. His once stoic face now held a manic gleam in his eyes, his skin becoming as pale and unnaturally smooth as polished stone. The very air of the cave seemed to nourish him, and the obsidian, he was sure, communicated directly with his very essence, a silent pact forming between man and geological marvel. He began to perceive others, particularly fellow prospectors, as threats, as potential thieves of his precious knowledge, his rightful bounty. Word eventually reached Kingston that Elijah Thorne had struck it rich but had vanished into Serpent Gorge. This was a common tale in the Ozarks, a mix of wishful thinking and desperate speculation. But something about this rumor was different. Thomas Avery, a former associate of Elijah's, was in Kingston stocking up on supplies. Avery was a burly, good-natured man, but also driven by a desperate need for a lucky break. His family, struggling back in Kentucky, depended on his prospecting. When he heard about Elijah's supposed strike and his odd behavior of hoarding his discoveries, Avery became concerned. "Elijah's a stubborn man," he told the shopkeeper, "but he ain't never gone fully quiet like that. Something ain't right." Avery, a seasoned prospector himself, gathered a small party of two other men, Jacob and Caleb, equally desperate and eager for any potential spoils, and set out for Serpent Gorge. Their journals, pieced together years later, described the difficult trek into the forgotten canyon, the unusual silence that preceded their arrival, and the palpable shift in the air as they neared Elijah's cave. The very air itself hung heavy and strange, Jacob wrote, like breathing silence. Caleb, more prone to superstition, mentioned the unusual behavior of their horses. They balked at the canyon entrance, their eyes wide and rolling. Caleb said bad spirits in them rocks, but I tell you, it felt more like something else. Like the ground itself was breathing something cold and quiet. Upon entering the canyon, Thomas Avery quickly confirmed that Elijah was still in the cave. Smoke from a small, crude fire curled from the entrance. The silence within the gorge deepened as they approached, becoming unnervingly profound, almost as if sound itself was being absorbed by the rock walls. They called out, but received no response, only a faint, crystalline hum that resonated in their chests. Inside, the cave was a kaleidoscope of shimmering black and violet, the obsidian crystals glowing with a subdued internal light that distorted all sense of depth and perspective. And there, deeper within, amidst a growing pile of roughly extracted ore and crude tools, sat Elijah Thorne. But it wasn't the Elijah they knew. Elijah was thin, his eyes unnervingly wide and black, reflecting the obsidian's faint glow. His movements were jerky, unnatural, as if he were fighting an invisible tether. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a strained rasp, not entirely his own. "Mine, all mine. The whispers, they tell me what to do. More, always more." He was surrounded by small, crudely fashioned obsidian tools, and his skin had a translucent sheen, almost like polished stone. Avery tried to reason with him, But Elijah merely muttered, distracted, his attention constantly drawn back to the throbbing obsidian vein. He became increasingly agitated as Avery insisted he leave the cave. Then something shifted. Elijah's body seemed to stiffen, his muscles tensing in a bizarre way. A guttural growl, utterly inhuman, emanated from deep within his chest, echoing strangely in the silent cave. His eyes, now entirely black like polished obsidian, fixed on Caleb. A crystalline spike, made of obsidian and unnervingly sharp, shot out from Elijah's hand, piercing Caleb's chest with unnatural force and speed. Caleb collapsed dead before he hit the ground. Avery and Jacob watched in stunned horror. It was clear Elijah was no longer himself. The obsidian was not merely a source of wealth. It had warped him, consumed him. Avery instinctively raised his rifle, but a searing pain shot through his mind, forcing him to drop it. The cave hummed, vibrated, its deep resonance turning his bones to jelly. Elijah, or whatever now controlled him, lunged, moving with a speed and ferocity that no human could possess. Jacob, terrified, fled back towards the canyon entrance, but the cave's distorted acoustics muffled his screams. Avery, pinned down, watched in mute horror as Elijah, or the force acting through him, dragged Jacob back into the deepening gloom of the cave. He realized with chilling clarity that this wasn't about gold. It was about something far more sinister, something that was slowly collecting. What Avery saw next, or rather what he intuited in the distorting echoes of the cave, remained etched in his nightmares for the rest of his life. He scrambled out, battered and traumatized, convinced that a dark and sentient force now commanded the Obsidian Heart. Days later, a desperate and emaciated Thomas Avery stumbled back into Kingston. His harrowing account of Elijah Thorne's madness and Caleb's gruesome death was initially met with disbelief. Sheriff Jebediah Cooper, a pragmatist rather than a man of folklore, dispatched a small, reluctant posse to Serpent Gorge, suspecting Avery's tale to be a symptom of gold fever or mountain delirium. The posse consisted of 4 men: Cooper, a young deputy named Daniel Burke, and 2 grizzled trackers, Silas and Jed. Their journal entries and later testimonies offer a fragmented but terrifying record of their ill-fated mission. Silas, an experienced tracker, immediately noticed the unnerving absence of wildlife around the gorge. "The very birds won't sing near that place," he recorded. "It's wrong, unnaturally quiet." Upon entering, Deputy Burke, young and ambitious, scoffed at the silent spirit's claims, eager to prove his bravery. As they neared Elijah's cave, the oppressive silence grew thick and suffocating. Sheriff Cooper found Elijah's crude camp, abandoned tools, and fresh tracks leading deeper into the cave. But the traces of awe, so evident in Avery's excited description, were strangely minimal, almost non-existent. Inside, the obsidian vein shimmered, pulsating faintly with violet light. It wasn't until Jed, one of the trackers, accidentally stumbled into a previously hidden fissure that the true horror began. His scream was strangely muted, almost absorbed by the cave's unnatural acoustics, as the fissure suddenly split wider, revealing a deeper, pulsating darkness below. Elijah Thorne, appearing from the shadows, was barely recognizable. His body seemed to twist, his limbs elongated, his skin almost transparent, like obsidian. His eyes glowed with an eerie violet light, a chilling mirror of the crystal he had become entwined with. From his grotesque hands, crystalline barbs of obsidian now protruded, shimmering with dark malevolence. Elijah, no longer a man but a warped extension of the cave itself, moved with preternatural speed. Jed, caught by a crystalline arm that erupted from the fissure, was dragged violently into the opening, his last cries swallowed by the resonating hum of the obsidian. The posse scrambled. Cooper ordered them to retreat, realizing they were outmatched by something far beyond human understanding. Elijah, fueled by the absorbed energy of his victim, now seemed stronger, faster. His voice, when he laughed, was a discordant symphony of metallic echoes, full of mocking malice. "Foolish, come to mine," he rasped, the obsidian-like spikes on his body growing visibly longer. Deputy Burke, eager to prove his worth, aimed his rifle, but a crystalline shard erupted from Elijah's shoulder, piercing Burke's throat with deadly precision. He collapsed, gurgling on his own blood. Sheriff Cooper and Silas, horrified, returned fire, but their bullets seemed to be absorbed by Elijah's hardened, almost rock-like flesh, barely slowing him down. Elijah seemed to relish their fear, reveling in the sudden surge of what Cooper later described as an unspeakable, cold energy that emanated from him. Silas, a veteran of several skirmishes, understood they were not fighting a man, but a part of the mountain itself. With an incredible burst of speed, Elijah slammed Silas against the cave wall, an obsidian spike from his arm impaling the tracker. Silas's dying gasps seemed to be drawn into Elijah's glistening, transforming form. Sheriff Cooper, alone and wounded, managed to crawl out of the cave. He heard Elijah's chilling, victorious laugh echo behind him, a sound that resonated deep within his bones. Barely conscious, he sealed the cave entrance with carefully placed dynamite, blowing a portion of the cliff face down to block it completely. The subsequent explosion caused the canyon walls to rumble for hours, a muffled roar of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Ozarks. Cooper eventually made his way back to Kingston, barely clinging to life. His terrifying, barely coherent account of what he witnessed, supported by Avery's previous ravings, was enough to convince the local authorities that something monstrous lay within Serpent Gorge. They declared the canyon officially cursed, ordering no one to ever enter it again. For years, the legend of Elijah Thorne, the man who became one with the Whispering Rock, spread among the Ozarks. Most dismissed it as wild speculation, yet no one dared venture into Serpent Gorge. They feared not merely the transformed prospector, but the growing silence that now clung to the canyon. A profound and unnerving quiet that seemed to draw all sound and life into its depths. The Obsidian Heart continued to whisper, no longer for gold, but for more. Decades passed. Serpent Gorge, buried and forgotten by all but local legend, remained undisturbed. The area became an enduring site of local folklore, whispered about by elders around crackling fires. Most tales spoke of it being haunted or of its power to drive men mad, always accompanied by warnings to steer clear. Official records from Madison County simply marked Serpent Gorge as an unexplored wilderness, its geological instability officially attributed to ancient earthquakes, subtly hiding the terrifying truth that Sheriff Cooper had bravely attempted to seal away. In 1948, a logging company, expanding its operations deeper into the Ozarks, rediscovered Serpent Gorge. Their topographical surveys indicated a substantial vein of black, glassy rock, what they mistook for industrial-grade obsidian, valuable for manufacturing. Despite the lingering local legends and some initial resistance from old-timers, financial pressures and the promise of modern machinery pushed the company to commence mining operations. A geologist named Dr. Vivian Vance, employed by the company, expressed initial scientific interest in the unusual mineral formations, but quickly grew uneasy as her equipment began to malfunction around the newly reopened cave entrance. Geiger counters registered peculiar energy spikes, and compasses spun erratically, not with magnetic anomaly, but as if being tugged by an invisible force. Her journal, later seized by authorities, documented her growing alarm. The geological anomalies here defy conventional understanding. The obsidian itself radiates a non-standard energy signature, almost resonant. It absorbs ambient light, creating localized patches of unnatural darkness and sound. I feel a profound quiet within its proximity, a stillness that sinks into the bone. It feels sentient. As the mining operations progressed, strange incidents began plaguing the workers. Tools disappeared overnight, shadows flickered in their peripheral vision, and a persistent low hum, heard more in the teeth than the ears, emanated from the mine shaft, causing severe headaches and increasing irritability among the crew. 3 workers vanished without a trace in a single month, their last known location deep within the expanding tunnels leading towards the massive obsidian vein. Panic began to spread. Vance's geological instruments, particularly a newly developed seismic sensor designed for subsurface vibration detection, started registering complex rhythmic patterns emanating from the central obsidian mass. These patterns, she eventually realized with terrifying clarity, were not random geological shifts, but something else entirely coherent, albeit non-linguistic, energy pulses that indicated intelligent communication. The hum was a conversation. One evening after the miners had left, Dr. Vance ventured deep into the mine with her advanced senses. She witnessed it. A new tunnel, exposed by recent blasting, led to the original core of the Obsidian Heart. There, bathed in its own pulsing violet glow, Elijah Thorne was waiting. He was no longer recognizable as human. A towering, twisted being, half man, half gleaming obsidian, fused grotesquely with the larger crystal formation. His skin was translucent obsidian, his eyes pure violet light. From his body, smaller crystalline spikes continually extended and retracted, almost breathing. Vance, hidden, observed him moving slowly, almost reverently, amongst newly fashioned obsidian tools and a fresh, unnervingly small pile of freshly chipped, dark crystal, pieces taken from the growing network that now included the vanished miners. Elijah, or the being he had become, was communicating with the obsidian, a silent, profound exchange of resonant vibrations. He sensed her, of course. His obsidian eyes slowly turned towards her hiding place, and a thought, cold and sharp as newly split stone, echoed in her mind. The hunger. You understand now. It feeds, it transforms. Join it. Vance fled, narrowly escaping, but not before realizing the true horror. Elijah Thorne was not a guardian of the treasure, but a transformed victim, the creature's newest extension. He was being used, much like his pickaxe, to mine more of himself, converting the fresh bodies into fresh material, fresh sustenance for the larger organism below. The obsidian consumed not just geological elements, but human flesh and vitality, replicating itself, slowly extending its crystalline influence deeper and wider through the earth. The disappearances of the loggers and workers were not merely accidents, but deliberate feeding cycles orchestrated by the now sentient obsidian and its first fully absorbed minion. Dr. Vance's desperate report to the logging company was met with skepticism and legal threats. But her scientific evidence of anomalous geological activity and unexplained disappearances could not be entirely ignored. The company, fearful of liability and widespread panic, sealed Serpent Gorge with enormous quantities of concrete and earth, citing unforeseen and unique geological instability. The official cause of death for the vanished miners was accident in tunnel collapse. The area was once again designated as forbidden, its legends whispered, but its true horror suppressed by a facade of scientific explanation. Dr. Vance, however, continued her private research, dedicating the rest of her life to understanding this unique organism she dubbed Lithosymphona, the Stone Symphony. She believed it was an ancient, perhaps extraterrestrial entity embedded deep within the Ozark bedrock, subtly drawing energy and assimilating consciousness. Her classified research, much of which remains unpublished, suggested that Lithosymphona didn't kill with violence, but rather transformed, converting life into more of itself, extending its silent, crystalline awareness throughout the planet, patiently consuming until all was one. The truth of Serpent Gorge lay buried once more, its entrance now reinforced with a century of rock, earth, and forgetfulness. Local legends about Elijah Thorne persisted, speaking of a prospector who found a treasure too beautiful, too demanding, but the details blurred with time. What was never forgotten was the silence. Even decades later, after major seismic events or during periods of unusual solar activity, locals sometimes reported a strange, deep quiet emanating from the sealed canyon, a subtle resonance that vibrated through the earth, felt in the soles of their feet and deep in their chests. Geologists occasionally noted peculiar, isolated patches of hyper-fertile soil and abnormally quiet wildlife in remote sections of the Ozarks, always in patterns that defied explanation, subtle extensions of Lithosymphona's ever-expanding network. The whispers from Serpent Gorge might have fallen silent for humans, but beneath the sealed earth, a complex crystalline network slowly expanded, each new crystal carrying a fragment of the absorbed consciousness, a memory of Elijah Thorne's madness, of Thomas Avery's terror. Of all those foolish enough to listen, the Obsidian Heart continued its slow, silent growth, patiently waiting for another who would come, seeking fortune, and instead provide it with the very essence of themselves. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and support us for more content like this.